Welcome, everyone, to the Interstice podcast. Thank you for tuning in, whether it's on Spotify, iTunes, wherever else that you are finding this. And today is a really, really exciting day. By way of an introduction, today I have with me someone who, it's not just good to have a conversation, it can be someone that you very much admire. And in this case, I do. This is Josh Olufemi, who's holding up the internet, who's holding up, like myself and any other creators, and all the incredible sort of tutorials that he's been creating for Adobe Premiere, Adobe After Effects. But it's not just tutorials. Josh is doing a whole bunch of different work, like video producing, lots of great stuff on his channel in terms of creating music videos, lots of information that you can get from almost any part of the digital creative spectrum. So thank you very much for coming on today, Josh. I really appreciate it.
Dave, it's an honor, man. It's an honor. This is gonna be fun.
Yeah, likewise. So I thought, I mean, the easy thing, like if anyone's ever searched any kind of tutorial like I have, they're probably going to find you. You're probably going to show up there at some point. But I'm curious, like, I think it'd be cool to start with your history, because it seems like there are certain people, when I watch what it is that they're doing, that I would be self-taught. And I think it's kind of like evident when people see what it is that I've done as a result of like looking at tutorials. But it definitely looks like your education in this sphere goes beyond, you're not watching other people's tutorials. I was wondering, what is your educational background that brought you to the kind of the skill set that you had now? Where did it all start? How did you get involved in this industry / creative medium?
Wow. So I watch a lot of tutorials. But as far as where I started out, though, I don't think tutorials even existed back. I don't know, maybe 6 years ago or something. I had a lot of really good mentors, and just a lot of trial and error. You know, like finding copies of, back then it was like Final Cut 7, Final Cut 6, and Final Cut 7 I started out on, and then I learned Premiere at a job I had. When the whole industry switched over to Premiere Pro.
Okay.
And yeah, tutorials are great though. Like I watch tutorials every day.
That's cool.
Stuff.
So I'm curious, when you say, like, let's talk about that job then. Like, what was it that you were doing that introduced you to Premiere? Then of course After Effects as well. What were you doing in that first position?
This is interesting. So I was fresh out of college. Then I worked at a shoe store for a few months, and then I got a position at this big paintball company, and I was basically their entire video department. And I shot and edited a bunch of kind of boring videos, a bunch of like Amazon product videos, basically, and white psych, product spinning around, the whole shebang. And so we were just using. I'd always used Final Cut, and if any of you guys remember, 6, 7, 8 years ago, Final Cut stopped Final Cut 7, changed to Final Cut X. The whole industry was like, "What the heck? It's a horrible piece of software," and so everyone changed to Premiere. That kind of freaked me out, but I was like, "Dang, I guess I got to do it." Premiere is a really easy transition, and that was actually when I switched from Mac to PC as well. It was a very life-changing moment in my career.
Okay, cool. So
yeah,
with that stuff, when you said you had mentors, obviously, like, you didn't just open the software. You probably had direction. Like, how were you initially learning? Like, where did the know-how come from? Like, this button means I can cut. This one means that I can nest. Like, how were you learning how to use the software?
So I began just being a camera person, a DP, I guess you could say. You just shooting a lot of footage. Started out actually in church, actually doing a bunch of camera. Still do a lot of stuff with church. But one of my mentors was like the main like video department head over in Portland, where I used to be at, Portland, Oregon, and we did all these, like, if you guys been to church, there's like Christmas, there's Easter, there's all these massive projects that involve a lot of video production, and so we'd shoot all that, and I didn't even touch editing for a little bit. I just learned how to shoot, the basics of exposing your camera, and then yeah, then I finally got my hands on Final Cut. It was just addicting. Like there's a lot of power in knowing how to, you know, cut and splice and put together media. Like tell stories. It's fun. That's what kind of roped me in.
That's cool. So where was the obviously then let's take it back like even a step further from that. Where did the interest in video come from? Were you like a huge movie buff? Like you love that stuff? Was it music videos? Like where did your interest in the medium even predating then your initial education? Where does that come from?
From a marketing background. Basically, a lot of people get into film because they like to watch. They're storytellers. They like to watch movies. Mm-hmm. Before I even got into music videos, I got really excited about how video could be used for short form content in the realm of marketing. It's funny. I guess you could kind of think of church video content as marketing material. I don't know if they'd like to consider it that, but it basically is, right? And
sure. Yes.
And then apart from that, flash mobbing. If those are you that were, that you remember 10, 12 years ago, flash mobbing was really popular. I don't know if I told you the story, Dave, but me and my bro started this group called PI, Portland Improv is what we called it.
Okay.
And I was like 16. I was really young. And flash mobbing just like started becoming popular in the US, on the East Coast mainly. And so I was in college at the time, and Facebook was just becoming a new thing. YouTube was becoming, this was 2006, I think. And so we figured out a way using Facebook events. Facebook events was really popular back then, when you could schedule an event and get a lot of people to come. And, we kind of had a following where we were going to school, We gathered this kind of following of people that would go out and do these crazy flash mob events with us. So for example, real quick, we did like this thing called the Portland Freeze every year, where we got like 1,000, you can still see it on YouTube if you look it up, like 1,000+ people for a couple of our events, like go out in the middle of downtown in Portland and like freeze for 5 minutes, strike a pose. And, everyone that was like in the specific area we were meeting were like just surprised, like what the heck, there's this frozen mass of humanity. And then the whole thing was, you're supposed to, after 5 minutes, everyone is just supposed to leave as if nothing happened. And it's just like a funny way to freak people out. We were young kids. We did another one where like everyone, like a bunch of people, hundreds of people would like burst out in a spontaneous song in like the local mall. We had random ideas. It was fun. So I realized that if I learned how to shoot and edit video, and then edit video of the event and post it on YouTube, that it would make the next event even bigger, because people were like, oh snap, it was a cool spectacle you guys did. We used video to market events, video marketing, it's becoming to be a new thing. From there, then I got into I finished college, moved back to LA. I was like, oh, music videos are a cool thing. Then after that, I slowly started, understanding, storytelling, narrative, kind of maturing my skill.
Oh, that's fascinating.
As far as yeah.
So kind of like starting from these, like if you say it was the sort of like materials you're working with your church, these flash mobs so many years ago, and it caught your interest. It was something that you enjoyed doing. Just a general like, this is fun, I should get better at this kind of like thing. So that's that, I guess that speaks to the whole like something important, like I'm kind of connecting the dots in terms of the presentation that I see in your videos, is that you were making this kind of content prior to the channel itself. So that was my next question, was going to be that, so you made this stuff that you could like attract people to the flash mobs. That's interesting. What was the kind of spark for you in terms of starting your own channel? Because I found your channel like years ago, but obviously I'm sure you had created it predating when I found it. So what was the impetus behind that? When were you like, oh, this is cool to do for flash mobs, but like, I think I could make the Josh Olufemi channel, and yeah, what was the impetus for that? And it seems clear to me now, there's like a sort of, channels definitely evolve, but like what was the initial thought? I'll make this for X reason. Like why did you get into it to begin with?
That's a good question, man. Like, so the straight up reason was there was a lack of educational content for short form post-production tutorials on YouTube, like specifically for music videos and then specifically for hip hop. There's nothing. I taught for 3 years at a local community college here. So I had like a ton of curriculum that, I taught the same 2 classes every year. So I was like, yo, I could translate this to online tutorial format. And instead of reaching a certain number of kids every year, I could reach thousands potentially of people. And so I started off just by making basic Premiere Pro tutorials. If you've never used Premiere Pro before, watch this video and in an hour or so, you'll get it. And then from there, kind of expanded on the other subjects.
Cool. That's like, I mean, I guess it's a classic example, right? It's like any good business sees a need, and then should it align with your personal interest, then you found the business that makes sense for you, as opposed to like trying to force yourself into something that you only see potential, but it's not personally what you would enjoy spending the time doing. And it's isn't it fascinating? Like, a lot of people, I understand there's this kind of push and pull that occurs on YouTube between, or even prior to this, but this like commercialization versus pure art, that people are like, they don't like, a lot of people would say they don't like how YouTube moved towards more the kind of format that is rewarding, monetized, like basically the reward becomes more the like fiscal element as opposed to the creative element. But then I want to let you jump back in, but then I think it became something very positive.
Yeah. Okay, you get it. Yeah. So totally disagree on anyone that would say that. In that, what YouTube, trust me, I have a lot of issues with YouTube. I won't go into that, but the one thing that YouTube did do right is adding the monetization element, because I think that everyone at heart is an artist. Like, everyone that's doing like the stuff we're doing, right? Me and you, Dave, like on YouTube, and apart from YouTube, just in our life, we're creatives. We like to shoot. We like to edit. We're doing it because we love doing it. The issue is that we have these things, like we have bills, right, that we really would rather not worry about.
Yeah. But
what YouTube does though is it allows you to do what you love and monetize that in a way so that you can have your bills paid kind of on the back end, kind of through residual means, and you can continue doing hopefully you're doing the thing that you love. The fact that YouTube monetized their whole system enables us to do the things that we love more without even having to worry about money. Like, oh, I got to work a side gig, do some corporate video that we may or may not want to do, and split that time with YouTube. We can do YouTube, but we love doing full time, get paid on the back end, and yeah.
Absolutely. And the nature of the environment that you create there, I think naturally, because people want to have whatever it is that they create, they want to have that scene. That's like the artist-audience relationship. That's what exists. When you monetize the system, what that has the effect of doing is where people are generally, whether they like to admit it or not, and maybe it's not always in the spirit of this word that we participate, but there's a competitive element that if you want to be seen by more, then your quality needs to be better. And when you add in a monetized aspect to it too, it increases another level of competition, that what you saw as a result of that is an evolution
rewarded
of the content that gets rewarded. So before, where you had pure, just like artistic, which is the best art, and that's totally subjective, there was this, these type of videos, because they're better, are just going to reach a greater audience. And so the quality of everything, I mean, and it still continues in the same vein, just goes up and up and up. Like if you compare tutorials in their first iteration versus how you see them now. I see some people with tutorials because they know that if they want to be seen in the amount of like people who are putting their content out there, you need to differentiate. Well, how do you differentiate? You differentiate through quality. And what does that mean for like the end consumer of that content? It means that it just gets better and better and better. Like, it is unbelievable now, even, and this rate has continued, that I see people creating tutorial content that looks as cinematic as a cinematic video. Like, it looks, you would watch it just to enjoy the composition of the video, let alone the educational aspect that you're getting out of that. And I feel like that comes from, now more people want to do it because it's monetized. Now there's an even greater reason to make better content. And also, like, and I feel it's like a tertiary layer, because in terms of pure ad revenue, that's not actually where people are making their bill paying money, although they can if they get larger. It's usually that just as a fact that that was there, everything got better, but then as your reach and your audience grows, you're finding alternative means and networking to grow the sort of like monetary return that lets you become creative full time. Like, I haven't minded it. And you actually, we could talk about this, like, you made a video, I remember it now, one of the ones I was talking about, that was, the wrong word would be like, maybe you called it, it was like something like, why do my YouTube videos suck, or something like that. And it was talking about, the wrong description was like, it's not the uncanny valley, but it's like this, in terms of improvement, where you know that you're better, but where people are only comparing the absolute best to the absolute best, that the quality of the video that you've made is in this like weird limbo where you're definitely better than anybody who has ever like not made anything before. But if you're going to compare yourself to the highest standard that's available, you're just not there yet. So you have to kind of persevere in this no man's land until you hit this critical point. You suddenly look at your videos and recognize that you finally evolved far enough that you could count yourself among this like really, really high layer that is what people will turn to when they're looking at all the different options that they have.
That's right. And that should be an encouraging fact that you're in that area. The majority of the people in the creative space, whether they're tutorial makers or anything on YouTube, are back on the other end of that graph, where on that end of the curve, where, you know, they're not getting a lot of hate comments, they're not getting a lot of criticism, because just the expectation's a lot lower, right? But you know, right when you're getting at that point where, you know, people are starting to see, wow, this guy's actually pretty good, or girl, but not quite to the point of like who's someone like really talented, like a Jesse Driftwood or a Peter McKinnon video. You know, you're gonna get a lot of these comments like, oh my gosh, like you know, your audio could be a little bit better, you know, your lighting isn't soft enough, or you know, you didn't, you know, your footage isn't stabilized, and it can be really hard to be in that place, because you're starting to get a lot of criticism. But that's a good thing, because you're being, the expectation of your art is a lot higher.
That's the best way. That's like, I was trying to remember kind of the spirit of it, and that was the other key point, is that people who reach this almost their level, they feel like the more that they invest, the greater criticism they receive, but that's because they're coming closer and closer to what would break through to that level that would be accepted as professional. So if you're going to play with the big boys, you're going to receive the same sort of like criticism that would be leveled at them on that playing field. So you can kind of invert that feeling where it's like, why does everybody hate me now? Well, that's because everybody sees you now and compares you to the absolute best. So just for aspiring people, it can be a good sign.
Now, another thing could be that because you're doing so good, your audience has grown, so you have a, you know, bigger group of people. There's a lot more eyes on your work, so you're gonna get a lot more just comments, good and bad. That's another thing too. But I also have another video, another couple videos I know I've made, where you have to be really careful that you have to understand actually where you're at. You may just have a lot of something that I call quality blindness. I think I picked that up somewhere. I forgot where that term, but you may actually not be up to where you need to be, right? Like the quality of your work may just not be that good, right? Like So what I say is you always listen to every bit of criticism and try to, you know, spit out the bones, and or what is it? Eat the meat, spit out the bones, or whatever it is, and you'll get to the point where you'll be able to actually learn and internalize criticism, even if that person like isn't really offering constructive criticism. They're just a hater, if you want to call it, whatever that means. There's always going to be a certain amount of truth to whatever they're saying, and so you'll be able to, you know, as you mature as a creator, you're gonna get better at understanding quality, and being able to compare. I'm always about comparing. People are always like, don't compare yourself with someone else. Compare. I hear this all the time. Compare yourself with yourself. Don't worry about, you know, put your blinders on. Don't worry about anyone else. I'm like, yo, compare yourself with people so you know where you're at.
I completely,
you know,
and utterly agree. So far as it's useful, like when you think about it, it's an easy thing, and I'm sure like people do this, and sometimes it seems just like lip service, where they go back and they're like, I watch my first videos and it's so cringy. But there's a lot of truth in that, where like I remember some of the most ambitious projects that I made, which when you spend so much time making something, you kind of get lost and super associated with whatever it was, and you can only associate the quality with your connection and effort put into it. And there's a massive difference between, anyone could appreciate that you put 100 hours into this, but that's a separate metric from how does the 100-hour result that you created compare to the 100-hour result that somebody else created. Where, yeah, like some of my most proud of projects, I look back and I think of how much I love them, and now I can totally recognize I'm still at this state in many ways, but just how amateurish something is. There's a book I read recently that I'm like shouting it out in every podcast right now, but it's incredibly useful. It had so many good points. It was called Creativity Inc., and it was by the founder of Pixar Animation, and he was talking about how useful it is, or like for a perspective for people who are going to make anything, that it is the first thing that we do as an artist is we associate like the ego with the project. But then that has, well, first it can have a good effect that it's like you're going to put you into that, which is talking about the effort element of it. But then when that project receives criticism, it feels like a criticism of you as opposed to the project, where what you need to start doing is, if somebody criticizes something, maybe they even intend it as a criticism to you, because like there's not a lot of professional constructive criticism out there. A lot of it, they will still do that. They'll say, this piece of art is you, but it's your job to say, they may have said that, but I'm not going to pay attention to the part that's talking about me. I'm going to separate this from myself and treat it as the video. So treat it as a criticism of the video and not you, or whatever, you know, piece of art it was, or like tutorial or whatever it is that you're making. And then you just don't take it so personally anymore, because you're like, you can freely criticize this because that criticism doesn't mean anything about me. I'm not the thing I made. Much as sometimes it feels good to feel like the thing we made, we are not that thing. And when you create that separation, you become more objective. You're able to take on, you know, whether it's hate and useful criticism or semi-useful or whatever it is. It's just a better perspective in the end, is to disassociate yourself, no matter how tempting that is, with the stuff that it is that you're making.
And oh, can it be tempting?
Oh,
can it, Dave?
Yeah. Like we so want to be the thing that we made, especially if we love it. But that won't. You know, that kind of goes into a sort of interesting. It gets a little bit, you know, not to make it dive right into a philosophy thing, but the desire to do that is like the most human thing in the world, but it's not ultimately that useful. And I think there's something kind of cool, and this is also maybe it's what you can replace the feeling of it needing to be you with its own separate thing, and that you start to realize how art, because it's so subjective, once released into the wild, belongs to everyone. That piece of art is now, whoever watched it, it's their piece of art. And when you recognize that there's this kind of like, once it's, as I say, released into the wild, it's like a collective object. It's no longer yours to say that, no, that's mine, because everybody's changing and creating their own sort of discourse as they interact with it. And that's kind of amazing. I think if you accept that and you kind of like let everything go, it becomes greater than yourself, because it becomes absorbed by the collective audience that's now going to have their own personal experience of it.
That reminds me of a documentary on YouTube called Everything's a Remix. I don't know if you saw it.
That name really rings a bell, like strongly. I'm not sure if I've seen it. What's the story there? What's that about?
Everyone watching should watch this, by the way. So it's kind of going off of the fact that every piece of artistic thing that we do is based off of something else, which I think everyone understands to a certain extent. But this documentary just like literally goes through music, movies, what else, like books, like all this stuff. I was like, I had no idea. It was crazy. But you're right. Going back to what you're saying, you were talking about that in the realm of just being able to handle criticism, right? Kind of having that mindset, I'm sure works.
Yeah, it's I'd want to watch it now, like with my attention focused on it. Yeah,
it's good. It's really, really good.
Yeah, there was a cool idea. This is funny. It goes back to like my high school, but it was like a great point of perspective building on this idea that one of my teachers was talking about, where he's like, what you have to understand is that it sounds kind of brash, but it's like there are no new ideas. Everything that people create will always be from, whether it's conscious or subconscious, from a prior experience they have. And he made the point, he's like, think of any sort of alien that you see in a movie. What do they often look like? They look like insects. Well, that's because we can conceive of insects and we just adapted them, but that means it's coming from an idea that we previously had. Any sort of iteration comes from something that's already occurred before, which is
my AirPods
cool
are about
thought.
to die, by the way.
So, okay.
My AirPods are dying, so like now you're only in one ear. But we can keep going. I'm just gonna switch over to my earbuds.
Okay, cool. I think a really cool thing, because this is a big focus of a lot of the work that you're doing right now, is with the music videos. So I think that could be like a really cool place to be like, what are some of those that really stuck out to you that you were like, oh, I would like to appreciate these more. I want to know how to do them better. Who was standing out to you when you were first, getting involved with that stuff?
Oh, who'd I look up to as far as music video directors?
Yeah, I guess that'd be the way to put it.
Colin Tilley.
Okay.
Music video god, amazing. There's my bro Man Alonzo's pretty talented as well. You see him on the channel a lot. Who else? Mike Ho, very talented guy. These are all, and just to give you a little bit more explanation, Colin Tilley is literally the boss of like pop and hip hop videos. Every one of his videos, there's an original aspect to it. Like a lot of the things that we're used to as far as camera shaking, lens flaring, him, Man Alonzo, a couple of these, these OGs, they started this thing that all of us kind of, younger creatives, we do all the time. It's almost going out of style now because we do it so much. Speed ramping, camera shaking, lens flare,
right,
lens distortion.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's can you name for the layman, myself included, where this is another, it's just a fact of being a director. People will know the video, but they won't know the director. Would you be able to say some of the?
I know, it's a shame, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's a shame, but
yeah.
It's kind of like what would you?
But I get it.
It's cool though, because you're like the guy who it's like, what do you do? And you're like, this video? I created that video, and they're like, what? That was you? That's so cool. What are some of the music videos they worked on? Like, what are the songs? Would you be able to name, to make the link? Because then people will probably be like, oh, I know that song. I know that video. What?
Good point. Okay, so think about if any of you guys seen any Chris Brown music video.
Okay.
The first 40 Chris Brown music videos, 40 plus music videos, were Colin Tilley videos.
Okay.
So I mean, think from Look at Me Now to Deuces to I can't think. Y'all CB fans know what's up. Let's see. Matt Alonso. He did what he did. He did Kiss Me Through. He did like some Soldier Boy ones. He did like Far East Movement. He did Lolly by Justin Bieber.
Okay.
Yeah, so like think of like action packed, stuff going all over the place. Really visually captivating videos from the last couple decades.
So awesome. That gives us a great basis. So one thing I'm also really, really interested in, and for someone like yourself who's watching these, learning from these, one thing we can all appreciate you're tapped into generally when you're on YouTube, if you're doing anything a little bit more cinematic, is the kind of trends that move through the industries, whether it's like music videos or just like say cinematic videos on YouTube. I mean, one of the ones that was most recent, I mean, I'm certain it would probably come down to like Sam Calder, but like zoom transitions mixed with, like lots of like zoom rotation and pan transitions. That has been done to death now. And I feel like people are moving to, it may have been again in one of your videos where it was talking about transitions, which should always enhance the story. People get sick of hearing that. It's like your gear doesn't matter. It's like, yes, we know, everybody can talk about that. But I'm curious, like what do you see as a trend in this? What do you see as a trend in cinematography, or just like anything to do with the direction that music videos are moving right now?
Yeah, so travel videos were a big thing. It's hilarious. Sam Calder, Matt Como. Yeah. I still think they're very talented. I think that a lot of people that try to copy them are not talented, and they kind of ruined the whole thing for them. Unfortunately, I don't know them personally, but it was very interesting seeing that happen. That when the imitator isn't able to quite get up to the level of excellence,
absolutely,
and almost kind of ruins the effect because they overuse it. But and I'm in that. I'm not good at travel videos at all. I don't think I've even shot one yet. But so shout out to them. I think as far as okay, so trends, right? I remember when I first started YouTube, light leaks are a big thing.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. So I had this, that was actually one of my first digital products, a light leak pack. And I was so like proud of it. I was like, oh, I figured out how to do this. There's all these ways you can like, take your lens off or like shine a flashlight in your lens, But a huge thing was like selling light leaks as digital products. So you'd make light leaks in like a dark room. So you'd have the light on like a black background, and then you put it on your footage, change the blending mode to screen, and bam, you got light leaks. And people overused it. To be honest, if you want to use light leaks, you really should get an anamorphic lens, or just do it manually with a flashlight.
Right.
That passed. And then I remember like speed ramping was a big thing. I still like speed ramping, but and then what else? Camera shaking in music videos for sure. And then a big one was gimbals. I remember when gimbals came out, I was like, yo, every music video, everyone had a gimbal. The Ronin M, made stabilized, electronically stabilized camera movement so cheap. But I mean, people overdid that, and they just didn't know how to use it that well. It just looked so rigid. Now we're going back to handheld stuff for a lot of types of music videos. Now a big thing is emphasis on behind the scenes content.
Okay.
Which is interesting. So say, you get all these social media platforms blown up. Instagram's been around for a while. But social, the tutorials are becoming part of the rollout, I think, of content now. So it's like, say you see a really dope like time lapse, hyperlapse tutorial or hyperlapse, video on Instagram. The next post is probably going to be a side by side of like, the actual, behind the scenes process in real time. Matt Alonso is actually one of the people that kind of created that, which is interesting. It's stuff's always changing.
I think it's a fantastic observation, because the truth of it is, and the people that I see who I respect, like that are made, like, I really love cinematic videos. There's something that whether it's like a sort of just like an emotional one, where it's like, or it's they'll be like they'll take some sort of piece of writing and it's some sort of reflection on life, or it's usually writing. It's like somebody has written out like, this is what it means to me to take pictures. Like I bring him up quite frequently. There's this guy named Aiden Robbins, and he's a younger creator, fantastically produced content. But what has happened is exactly what you're describing, where actually the reason a channel becomes popular is they make really, really sick tutorials, but then that's the thing that is most mass consumed, because more and more people are trying to, they want to be creative, they want to do their own, but then they enjoy the tutorial, but then they stick around for the way that it's applied. They'll be like, oh, now I'll watch his creative stuff because I like learning from him. And so I guess it's almost like a part of like, yeah, that's what it is. It's like art has gotten this equal emphasis with the educative aspect behind it, which in some ways it bums me out, because like my personal preference is I just like the cinematic video, and when there's so many people making better tutorials than I could ever dream, and I don't actually have a professional background in it, where that like super viral content, which would be the tutorial, so like the basis of your channel, I have no interest in, but that's often how people are like rising to more public awareness, and then they stick around for the the creative stuff that it is that they're doing. But that's like, it's almost, I want to merge a word here with like creativity with education, that like that whole sphere has absolutely exploded. Whereas I think you've done, isn't it? Yeah, it's so interesting. I think you've done a cool thing with yours, where it's sort of like you have yours is like very, very educational, but then including the other artists with it, the other like directors, you've got this other like, it's still educational, but there's something personal to it, to bring in like so many different perspectives that are like, it's not just your own, which is wonderful, but like then these other people that are involved with it, it's kind of like a whole industry inclusive kind of style you've gone with.
I'm actually trying to move away from tutorials. Don't tell me when I said that. Okay. Right. Yeah. But so like tutorials are great, and I'm sure but this is my plan. This is my like, let's hear it. Talking goals, right? Yeah. I love documentaries. Right on. So in the ideal world for my channel, we would have a channel full of just documentaries. Okay. So I call them mini docs, because they're shorter, like 15 minutes to 30 minutes, right? Yep. I did like a cool one on K-pop. Two cool kind of shorter videos on K-pop in the summer. Before that, I talked about like music video budgets, and it's kind of like breaking down like editing theory, or just different cool historical aspects of how our industry has come to what it is. And then even like, you could even call them mini docs, which may be a better word, maybe just extensive interviews with B-roll on top of it, right? Like interviewing really cool people that maybe have made a lot of dope content that you've heard about, but you just didn't know about them, like you were saying before. I love stuff like that. So that's funny. We are of identical minds in this. When I think of the direction that I like to go, and I see some channels that have just straight up done this, like that's actually their basis. My name for them, I call them minimentary, like where you take, like I liked yours, mini doc is another great word. It doesn't matter what we call them, they're kind of in spirit the same, where we're appreciating, and it also makes sense for a smaller scale production, that where like, an hour and a half long documentary, those are massive undertakings.
But if you make
Right.
a 5-minute doc, a 10-minute doc, 20, 30, whatever you're referring to, the scale of the project is such that you can still do something as an individual or a small team, but have
Yeah.
a totally professional result. And it kind of goes with this appreciation of humanity in general, that the opportunity to tell so many interesting stories on that scale is so much more available to the every creator, because your 3 degrees of separation puts you in contact with somebody that maybe it's not the hugest documentary story, but it's no less interesting. So like, you know, like oil spills in the Gulf, that's super interesting, but it's massive scale, where the individual story of this artist who might only be like relatively known, but is doing such interesting things, will be no less engaging. And you can, in this shorter time frame, create something that works with your time, you know, with what you've got in terms of hours and minutes to work with.
That's very true. I think YouTube kind of rewards longer form content too, I'm realizing. So while it does take a little bit more time and research to create long form, whether it be tutorials or even mini docs, I've never had like a long form video tank as far as, or like fail as far as views go, what I would consider, you know, a good amount of views for my channel. All my high view videos are usually longer videos.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting.
30 minutes to an hour.
And that's wonderful. Okay, so and that's ambitious. I mean, I really like that too, because it also that is definitely goes against people's expectations. I know that the algorithm moved to favor watch time, so then engagement over a longer period. You would think that would be the thing that people would go for, but you always hear more popularly that like the shorter the content, the better, because that's the attention span that people have. But we're discovering that that's not necessarily the case. You know, why are podcasts then so popular when this is like the ultimate long form? You know, this will go for like, you know, an hour and a half, 2 hours, anything like that. I'd want to throw out, as I do in every one of these podcasts, to let people know there's this fantastic mini doc channel. They're called Archipel, like Arch, ARCHIPLE. And they do essentially mini documentaries of all sorts of like fascinating personalities in like the creative world in Japan, whether it's like composers or manga artists or just like creatives in that general sphere. And it shows that there's an appetite for that like more thought out documentary style thing. It doesn't have to be like the length of a reel that only is like interesting people nowadays. You can. That's cool to hear, like you said, that it's so. How long, for example, was that K-pop one that you did?
So I did a 30-minute K-pop video, and then I did like a 10-minute one.
Okay.
I made them at the same time, but I just cut them into 2 different videos.
And which of those 2 performed better for you? I'm curious.
I forgot.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, hey, it's all good. So I mean, I think this is cool too. It's like, I definitely think you've positioned yourself well. You've kind of done what I was talking about, where, I mean, here's a good question, so I don't just like, you know, it's not arbitrary that I'm stating this from. Like, what was your first video to do very, very well for you? Do you recall?
The first video I made, actually, it was a series, 14-part series, how to learn Premiere if you've never learned Premiere, if you've never touched a video editor before.
Okay, those fundamentals of Premiere, not only are tutorials often very popular, the ones that address the basics, because it's this mass audience. So, okay, so there's kind of case in point. You had your tutorials, you get this kind of like basis of an audience like developed from those, and now you can leverage like your years of developing that initial interest now into the sort of like these kind of projects that you're interested in. I'd hesitate to go so far as to say that this is the sort of format that everyone should always follow, because again, it suited you and it was genuinely what you wanted to do at the time, and I don't think people should force themselves down a particular avenue, but it does reveal a bit of, you know, what we're discussing in terms of what it has mass popularity. So is that kind of, that's the
Yeah.
forecast for you to move into these documentaries? Like where do, I mean, goofy question here. Where do you see your channel in 5 years, or like make it even shorter? Like what are your plans for kind of like 2021, 2022?
Oh, so big plans. We have currently 5 teachers.
Okay.
I believe 5 teachers on our channel. I want to bump it up to 10 slowly over the course of this year.
Okay.
And we're going to be a channel that puts out content every single day. We already did that last year for a couple months, but we were working our butts off, and it was very unhealthy. So
Okay.
we're picking people to bring onto the team that specialize in specific things that are specifically things that I don't specialize in. So we have like a really dope audio guy, like 2-3 incredible VFX people that are more talented than I am. Quinn, she's like crazy at like product videography.
Okay.
It's been amazing. I've learned so much, like, but we're all learning from each other, right? So, but it's allowing us to put out quality content more frequently, and that's growing growing our audiences, growing our individual brands, growing the channel. So more content that's even more quality than people have seen in the past is the goal.
Awesome. So
yeah,
one of the things you just talked about there, this is like I think it's a really important subject, and it sounds to me, it was kind of like the heart and soul of what you're going forward with. So it's a word that gets overused, is collaboration, where I think too often, like this is a thing that people run into when they want to do anything, where they're making something and they want to know how to grow, and there'll be like there'll be a lot of sort of almost like platitudes thrown out. These people will say things, but they don't add nuance to the statement. They're like, you should collaborate, but then they don't say anything beyond that, where they're like, a lot of people just take that at face value, and they're like, I guess I just reach out to a dozen people and maybe one of them works with me. But a lot of people just won't do that. Just to find people to work with and just reaching out, it doesn't, sometimes it works, but I'm wondering, like where you said education, working with more content, the fact that you have several teachers on your channel, like let's talk about collaboration, but how do you do effective collaboration? How do you reach out to people, or how have you found you reach out to people in a meaningful way that they actually want to have something to do with you, as opposed to just like essentially the digital creative form of like cold calling? How do you make it more personal? Like what is your experience being, what works, what doesn't, finding people to work with that it makes sense as a collaborative partner?
So yeah, good question. You're talking about what goes into building a team.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it.
A sustainable team. To build a sustainable team, you have to build a team that's based on respect, like monetary compensation, as well as what's another one? Just like having a good system in place, as far as like just having systems that make the whole workflow process. Working with more than one person, a lot of opportunities for just pain and annoyance and strife. So if you have systems in place to kind of streamline a lot of things, that makes a very sustainable, it makes your team sustainable.
So fantastic points. Like you're saying, identify the pressure points, identify where you're going to find friction with the people that you're working with, identify what is actually valuable. What are you both gaining from the relationship that you have? What are working with, because I've noticed you have great people come onto your channel. What is your experience of like, how have you reached out to them? How are they reaching out to you? How have you even just perhaps through serendipity come in contact with these people that you're working with? Maybe that can speak to how you're finding anyone in the first place.
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's been a very slow process over the course of the last year. We've gotten up to 6 people. A couple people I've just known for a minute. and I just hadn't. My channel wasn't in a place where I was wanting to add more people into the mix. But when me and my business partner decided, hey, let's do this, it was very easy to like bring people into the fold. And then a couple people I met through my bro's really dope creative collective called Black with No Cream. Shout out to Ben Haggerty. He's been a long time friend. He started this cool, it's basically a Facebook group, but it's a lot more than that. It's this whole branded collective of people. They're always posting stuff, and I found 2 of my team members on there last year.
Black with No Cream.
Black with No Cream, yeah. It's like video editors drink coffee.
Okay.
So yeah, the Greer, everyone obviously is welcome. Everyone should join that. It's really, really dope. And then I'm trying to think of like, I mean, I guess we don't actually have a lot of people. It might have just been through those connections at this point.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it does sound for you, it sounds personal. It sounds like these people that you're meeting, I mean, it sounds like there is a little bit of degrees of separation between people that you may have just met through that, but the other people, you said that you know them for a minute, that it would, are they usually more personal for you, these people that you work with?
If they aren't, we make it personal real fast, meaning, you know, obviously we're trying to keep it professional, but I'm realizing that if, like you really got to know the person that you're bringing in to your brand, in a way, and then you got to communicate with them who you are as well. So I think we've been really lucky that just the people that we've gotten have been just amazing people.
That's cool.
But yeah, it's got to be a very slow and careful process for sure. What's different than that is guests.
Okay, sure.
Excuse me. We have guests on all the time, and who knows what some of these people are, but you know, but it's like some crazy talented people that I find. I'm like, yo, bro, let's do a video. Let's do a collab. Let's da da da. And there's less of you know, a long-term commitment with just dope people you bring on as guests.
So there's like, I think that delineation is gold in itself. There's like, so people, if you could think about it this way, where to look at it at first, it's sort of indiscriminate. Collaborate, but then a useful idea is to think in terms of, well, if you are going to collaborate, is this a guest collaboration, or is this going to be like a business partnership that's growing out of that? And treating them as the same thing would be a mistake, because in terms of time invested, in terms of output coming from that, it's worth knowing that they're going to be very, very different. So what's your experience then? I mean, this is just, it's really important to me because it's something that, as I say, I've definitely had to grow through. I think like I've suffered from an overabundance of openness, and I reach out to people, or at first I had reached out to people sort of indiscriminately, because I made the very stupid mistake of thinking that, oh, everyone's as open and just wants to make stuff like I do, where that's not the human condition. You can't fault people for that. Like they're not going to have the same feeling of comfort immediately with somebody else. They're going to have to come to that working together in a different way. How would, like, if you, I don't know if we call it advice, maybe again we just talk about it as like a fact of experience. What do you think makes reaching out to guests, how have guests worked for you when you're going to work with a guest? Like, how do you identify that? How do you approach it? What makes it have the best result for you?
Oh, I mean, there's been no issues with guests. Like, usually I'm a fan of the guest, and I'm hoping they say yes, you know. And there's some people that I just found on Reddit or someone. And you know, I haven't been a long-term fan, but I'm a fan of this specific piece of work, and I'm like, yo, or I read up on them, or I see them somewhere. It's like, it's been a great process, a great, yeah, we've had a ton of guests. We've had a lot of actually long-term guests, I could say, directors that have come in and out that honestly, if they wanted to be teachers, I would be like, yo, you can teach the rest of the tutorials for forever, but they can't, they have their own life. They're doing big stuff. So yeah, I guess kind of fall into a few different categories.
That's okay. So, I mean, I immediately picked up on something there. It's again, I think for people entering into things with the right spirit, it allows for a natural connection again. But for people starting where they don't know, they only know, I want to grow, I'd like to work with people. So I'll indiscriminately, just people who are doing even semi-similar work to me, I'll just reach out because that's what you're supposed to do. But the word that you use there, and we could call it a bunch of different things, we could get into it, is you said you're a fan of their work. And I think that that's so fundamentally important of a good relationship, that if you are going to work with someone, find something that, even if you don't develop a longer term, like really personal connection, you at least have a real investment in what it is that they're doing. You're not just reaching out to them because they make a music video. You're reaching out to them probably because there was this project they worked on that really interested you, or some other element, for example.
Yes. When I do not pick guests from my YouTube channel because they are great people. That's weird, because I'm trying to think if I haven't ever had a guest. I've had, it's funny, I've had people I've almost had as guests,
okay,
that are undeniably very talented, and they probably would have created a video that people wanted to see, but I found out about their personal lives a little bit later, and I'm like, ooh, that's interesting. But yeah, generally the number one thing as far as guests is very audience focused. Can my audience gain from their skill? And then whether or not we have a personal relationship, where I have a personal relationship with a guest, I have a personal relationship with the guest after the fact, is secondary, I guess.
Sure. But
but teachers completely different.
And the way that you're saying, or the way that you've identified whether they would good for your audience or not, and I'm inviting you to correct me here though, is something you've identified that's not a personal relationship, but that you personally respect in what it is that they're doing.
Yeah, because at the heart, we are an educational channel,
right?
Sharing skill.
Oh, that's cool. It's like, for a while I was just like, okay, this person's in Japan, reach out to them. This person's in Japan, reach out to them, and I had almost like as bad results as you could possibly have. Like, just no one to work with, a lot of pushback from people saying that they wanted to know people more personally, this, that, and the other thing. But as soon as I adjusted to approach people that I found something that I had a real interest in, like, I've seen this person's reels, and I could contact them and say, like, I saw this and this and this reel, and it's awesome. Like, I so appreciate that. Or the colors in your photography are amazing. Because you create this, like, this common ground by actually having that thing that, whether you knew them or not, you're probably going to continue to observe whatever it is that they're creating. I think that appeals to people. Or in your case, I just hope to reach out to people I feel like their persona matches their personality. Because when I watched your videos, I was like, Josh just seems like a genuine dude who cares about making cool stuff. Reach, at the end of the day, like you said, we got to pay our bills, but I do think that if you can accurately assess a personality, you also gain a foothold with that. Because people who are into that kind of thing, where they're like, I just want to make cool stuff at the end of the day, they won't be blinded by the priority of, for example, like, I'll only speak to somebody who's got 100K followers, or I'll only speak to somebody who has done this on Instagram, where you can sometimes get a sense of somebody's persona. And if you can accurately trace that, then you'll also have a much better experience. Naturally, as you grow in success, I think people are more willing to work with you regardless of anything, which is, you need to take the personal element out of that, because people are just, they see you have a greater footprint, and you shouldn't deny people that they would obviously see that as a greater benefit that doesn't immediately tar and feather them with they're only interested in reach, but they can at least see that, oh, this guy, call it like a portfolio. They can look at your portfolio and see that this person is legitimate, you know, which is another way to approach.
Like, and the cool thing about social media too is, I mean, even if your rationale behind, if I get what you're saying, giving people time is for growth hacking, I think is the right word, right? Like, like you like, man, like I had a bro, it's actually cool, this bro Eric,
all right,
Eric, check him out on YouTube. Okay. And it's cool how I kind of had like a cool little in on he learned how to edit videos through my tutorials, and according to him, I'm not sure which one, and like he started a YouTube channel January of last year, and with the goal of getting to 1 million subscribers by the end of the year, and now he's like, he just broke 1 million like in December.
Bastard.
And so
that's awesome.
Right? Like we're all saying that, but I'm like, obviously so proud of him. I'm like, like such a nice, genuine guy too, by the way, like really, really good guy. Cool. And like, so it's like, yo, you need to respect everyone. You know, it's like you never know where someone's gonna be in it. Like it's like, that's the beautiful thing about our industry. It's very much a meritocracy, right? I think it's called, where it's like, if you put in the effort and if you're talented, you'll be rewarded for it. So it doesn't matter where you are now, you could be in a completely different place if you get a viral video tomorrow.
Totally. I mean, I think that can be another thing. If people are looking at a couple of things that they're assessing with, like, oh man, who would be awesome to work with, where the numbers, although like it's cool, it's sort of like just it's a happenstance that might be associated with the experience of working with them. But like you're talking about, prioritize, or I would suggest you're talking about, prioritize their potential, and also what it is that they may have already done but not necessarily received a huge amount of growth from, because there's an endless parade of people that you look at their stuff and you're like, how are you not better known? Like one guy I found recently, it's a couple of artists actually, musicians. One of them, maybe he's bigger in terms of his like overall sales or something, but I cannot believe when I looked at his YouTube channel where he's at. But I've kind of now, like, under the guise of, like I said, I just want to genuinely enjoy what it is that you're doing. But then I've been surprised at sometimes the scale of these individual success. The guy's name is Derek Pope. Have you ever heard of him?
Derek? No.
Okay,
no, okay.
Check him out after this. I think it's his most recent album, songs like War Machine, Us and Them, Disguises, unbelievable. Like, just, to me, I'm like, this is a colossus of, like, this guy's going to be massive in the music industry. And then I go to his YouTube channel and he had 14K subscribers. I was like, what is, and you find these people all the time. Like, why does this guy not have, he sounds to my ear like a 1 million subscriber, multi-platinum guy. And I honestly thought, like, that's probably what I'm going to find here, but I'll still contact him because I love what he's doing. And then you find that he's on this scale. Another guy called Avion, I think his name is. I heard one of his songs in an Instagram reel, went and checked out his stuff, and he only had like 2 music videos, again, a following of like 8,000 subscribers. Like, I think that can also be another hopeful thing for aspirational creators, that just because you're looking at a scale of analytic success that might be lower, you are not necessarily looking at someone who has any less talent. They just, like, there's literally like an eternal spring of unbelievable people, if you're looking according to what they do and not as they're represented in terms of their success. Yeah,
because you don't know what the algorithm's doing playing games.
Like, yes,
algorithms always, I'm always disagreeing with the algorithm.
Aren't we all? No, where could we
that's
take
so
it
true,
then?
man.
So now let's just do some fun stuff. Like what's some music you're listening to now? Like what's caught your attention these days? What's some of the content that you're really enjoying?
Yo, what am I listening to these days?
Or watching?
Man.
Yeah.
Okay, so I am really interested in. I feel like I'm watching more movies than I used to watch.
Right on. What's
It's funny.
Yeah.
I love Quentin Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, Wes Anderson.
Nice.
I realized I'm so into video production, right? I'm so into music videos. I'm so into short form content. I realized, dang, I don't watch a lot of feature films, and because people always ask me like, Josh, okay, you're a filmmaker, but what do you watch? Da, da, da. And I'm like, I guess I'm not really a filmmaker. I'll tell you what I really like.
All right.
Like I said before, documentaries. I watch more documentaries than anything. I've watched all the every interesting documentary on YouTube. I feel like I've watched.
Okay.
That's like what I consider interesting. But so I've watched all the documentaries on Netflix. I've watched hundreds of documentaries on YouTube. Like that's what I want to go into, documentaries, less like narrative filmmaking. Yeah, that's where it's at, guys. You can learn it. You could controversial.
Okay.
Gotcha. Documentaries. You'll learn more watching a documentary than reading a book.
Oh, that's incredible. Why do you say that then? Why I would be devil's advocate. I'll come back at you once you give some thoughts to that. Why do you feel that?
Okay, so shout out to all the readers out there. Documentaries just it's the concentration of information.
Okay.
And the efficient transmission of information. I feel like I could watch a documentary, and if it's a well-made documentary, you could learn about a whole subject that would take and you could internalize it better, I think, than if you had read like an entire history book.
Okay, I like it. I mean, it's funny. I was gonna try and play devil's advocate, but I would agree with you. There's some like just in terms of pure the way that we like take input from reading or visual media. That expression, "a picture is worth 1,000 words," it's true. Here's a perfect example we can actually use. Kind of my sort of Japan centric experience of kanji. Pictographic language. Pictographic language can compress so much information because it has the phonetic sound of it, but also the pictographic meaning of whatever is associated with the kanji. So it means in a sound, like these two kanji next to each other will have two phonetics that mean sun, but then also within the image of the kanji, that sun could mean labor, and then the next one could mean like for a long time. And so you actually get like 3 sentences of information from reading these kinds of things. So I suppose when you're consuming a documentary, just the imagery, the efficiency, you would be taking it in. What do you think though in terms of something of a benefit from reading is that when you listen to documentaries, when you watch them, what would you say in terms of passive versus active? Because when you read, that's active. Well, you have to focus on what's being said. Whereas when you sit on the couch, there's so much that could be drawing your attention elsewhere. What do you think of that?
Check this out. Put those subtitles on.
Okay.
It's almost like you're reading.
Yes.
Best of both worlds.
Best of both worlds. And I suppose the comment there could be on the actual the consumer of the documentary, because if you're really into it, then you won't be so distracted by your surroundings. What's like some
you'll feel smarter too.
yes.
You'll feel like you're reading an actual book
with the subtitles, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I would say this, another controversial statement. Watching a documentary with subtitles is basically the same thing. It's the same process as reading a book with your audiobook playing in your ears.
You definitely would activate the parts of your brain associated with both experiences, so you can make an argument for that, for sure. Yeah.
You just lost half your audience, Dave.
Well, no, I mean, I love reading, and I love documentaries as well. I'm curious, is there any ones that have stood out to you recently that you've enjoyed?
Okay, let me actually think. Documentaries. Snap, getting put on the spot. I'm like confusing podcasts and documentaries now because I just watched a bunch of. I have like a whole thing of podcasts I always listen to.
Okay,
but as far as
go that direction then if you want to. What's the podcast?
I'm trying to think of documentaries though.
Okay.
I'll get back to that. Documentaries, podcasts.
Yeah,
I love Joe Rogan. Rogan, A1. Favorite one. I love Tim Dillon.
Okay.
You heard of him?
I've not.
It's amazing.
What's his format?
Just craziness. He talks about every current events. He's a comedian as well. You learn a lot about what's happening in the world, just in a long format. Brings on really interesting guests. He's a friend of Rogan. You learn a lot. You learn a lot in podcasts, don't you?
You learn an incredible amount, I think. And I mean, they're so tailor-made to whichever kind of experience you want, whether it's like humorous or educational. I mean, there's obviously some tone to what it is that I do here that I love about Joe Rogan's, which is it does not follow a thread. The only thread is that interesting people would come on and you would have a good conversation with them, but it's freedom of information. One day, I can't even remember the dude. There was a dude who was like the foremost like mathematician in regards to black holes. And then the next guy who comes on is discussing like the fascinating world of like psychedelics and fungus. And then the next person comes on is like a female doctor who specializes in like hydro and heat therapy, like just all of
How
that.
controversial do you get on your podcast?
I think, it'd be as controversial as we'd like, although I don't think I've had that many controversial guests. I had one great, one of my first guests who came on, his name's Derek. He was a software engineer, and we got a little bit into just like capitalist structure, like, because that's obviously, you get the two buzzwords, whether it's capitalist or socialist, and then people try and define your whole being by whether you say that you align with either end of this spectrum. But we were getting into kind of like the nuance that some of these ideas kind of exist in a continuum. Socialism becomes authoritarian, and capitalism, it becomes like there can be tones in capitalists that are actually quite egalitarian and socialist, and that there's like there's an equality of starting line. Like everyone should have an opportunity to participate in the free market. And that was a little bit controversial, I suppose. But
where did you lie on that? I'm curious.
I've never liked when people actually, to me, aligning yourself too far. I'm not a centrist, but I think that ideas borrowed from either side of economic values are useful. There is no situation that will always universally call it like a hyper conservative or hyper progressive mindset. It's so situational. So I would do away with, one of the things here, I can be more controversial. The idea of a two-party system in the States, to me, is absurd. Like, humans in their core, the better that we understand their sociology, are a myriad of personalities. Like, when it comes to like monetary systems, they'll be conservative, but then in social systems, they're entirely liberal. And there's so many different like subsets of our values. And so that saying that you only have like a binary choice, and when people, they also use that to just describe your whole being, to me seems like a completely broken system. I would say, and this is something that comes up in the conversations and books that I read, that politics as they exist currently, governmental systems are one of the most brutally lagging institutions of human civilization that exist in parallel with our other developing structures, like our technology. Technology, probably first and foremost, it cannot keep pace. The judiciary, like our systems of law, all that stuff, do not keep pace with our technological development. What do you think?
I think it's interesting you're talking about the duality of like almost left and versus right. I think you said this before, or I've heard this somewhere else, where like a better like spectrum would be like you just said this, less authoritarian and more authoritarian, right?
Yeah.
And you can see stuff on both sides that kind of like fall in both areas. And I remember I think it was a podcast I was listening that was like, if you were to try to err on the side that maybe the most beneficial is err on the side of freedom and less authoritarian than authoritarian, regardless on, that's something that both sides of the aisle could learn from. There are issues on both sides as far as, authoritarianism.
Totally. At the extremes of left and right, you become the same thing. You become there is no room for conversation aside from anything other than your belief. Well, it doesn't matter if you're left or you're right. That's the exact same behavior. So you've both become authoritarians because you only allow your value system to exist. So the more that we can stay away from extremes.
I'm definitely capitalist, though.
Sure.
Capitalist till I die.
Well, and I completely agree. And I'm coming from, I don't have a unique perspective. I have a perspective shared with lots of people that have like had a bicultural experience, which is the West, which is typically known as a individualist society, whereas living in Japan is a collectivist society. And where the West,
gotcha.
They often talk about the value of like, oh, it's really beautiful what goes on in Japan because people actually care about each other, and there's less selfishness and greed. But what it means in Japan at its extreme is like the dissolving of the individual. And people, it actually dehumanizes people because you no longer exist as an individual. You are only considered as a collective. And so then there's no room to individualize or have a personal voice. Everything is at the cost of individuality to create harmony, that the whole group will progress forward. And that's like just as insidious as the incredibly greedy person who only lives for themselves. In the end, it's an appreciation of one single thing, either an individual or a collective group, but they're still single entities at the end of the day. It's kind of the tyranny of the individual or the tyranny of the group that you have to contend with at either extreme of the kind of like social value system.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. I was if you wanna switch back to video production, that's totally fine too.
Yeah, no.
I'll have you force the switch. But a podcast that I really really like is have you heard of Serpent Zede and Winston?
Sure, Serpent Zede, mad respect for that guy. I loved his videos concerning China, very like professionally put together, and the guy's smart. He was really smart.
Seamook is the other one guy. Seamook and Winston, yeah.
I don't know Winston or Seamook, but I really like Serpent Zede. Really intelligent guy, very articulate.
Yeah, they're here in LA now. I'd love to actually hook up with them, but yeah, I've learned so much about obviously not Japan, but like mainland culture over in the mainland, and a lot of the things you're saying as far as freedom and right to work, private property, like culture, man. Culture is a very interesting thing. A culture can sway. Culture can hinder as well as prop up.
Totally.
A society. And yeah, it's really fascinating seeing people coming from other cultures give their perspective, give a fresh perspective, whether it be people like talking about the US or China or even Japan.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool.
What is your experience? I mean, this is something I wouldn't even say that it has to be like a discussion of multiculturalism, but I'm curious, like, what is your impression of the culture in LA in recent years? Like, what do you see? Do you see a cohesive culture there? Do you see, like, I mean, this is something I could know so much more of in the US, because the inter-ethnicity relationships that exist there. I mean, obviously, like, there's the massive, brought to the forefront, like, issue of racism, but we can talk about that. We can not talk about that. But, like, what's your personal experience of, even if it's just Americans interacting in the US, or if it's expats that you're also interacting with, like, what is your impression of, like, kind of the intercultural crossroads, whether it's just you're an American but you have this ethnic background, or just, like, you know, like the value system of the people that you're spending your day-to-day with there?
Gotcha. So good question, good deep question. I think that, so I've lived in the US my whole life. My family's from Nigeria.
Okay.
And then I'm like a quarter African American. The thing that I love about the US is you have, I mean, I guess you're from Canada, but it's probably the same in Canada to a certain extent, but the US, you have so many different cultures coming together, right? Different people groups from all over the world. But what's the thing that unites us, right? The one thing that unites us as Americans is the values that you know, that are instilled in the Constitution, but just in general. I was living overseas for a minute, right? And I just come back to the US and I'm just so, like, I'm an entrepreneur, right? At heart, and like, just the value of just people in the US are really nice. That just, as far as just the charity, like just as far as the numbers, as far as the amount the US gives, as far as not the government, but the just the people. People care for each other, like in no other country, I feel like, in the US. But on top of that, there's a beautiful individualism that I really treasure as well, where as an entrepreneur in the US compared to other countries, I feel very much free to make my own path. That'll vary state to state, you know, that's another conversation. But in general, I feel like I am an individual here. I'm a person that can make it if I stay focused. I tell that to myself. It's so easy for me to stray from, like, even literally keeping a calendar, like, what are my goals, am I reaching, but every time I've done it, last year was a really good example. Me and my business partner, we're every day we're gonna match these goals, and it, you know, this is during the pandemic, worst time to be having, you know, economic financial goals, and it's been our best year yet. It's like, and I feel like that was only possible here. Like, I'm a proud Nigerian, right? I love Nigeria. I love Nigerians. I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing if I was back in Nigeria. Okay. No way. The US is a country like no other, as far as the amount of growth you're able to get as far as living standards based on the internal culture that you decide to have, which is easier here because I feel like the overall American culture encourages that, hey, hard work pays off, type of deal.
And you see, so that, I mean, this is a really cool thing, because it seems now, obviously there's a great wealth disparity in the US, and I mean, more than anything, this is kind of an interesting thing to see if I can articulate this properly. There is a tendency towards negative opinions seeming more respectable or to have more weight than an optimistic opinion, perhaps having something to do with overly optimistic people can come across as naive, but then that's at the cost of this kind of like cynical view on life that can actually be inaccurate. Just because we like the person who's the naysayer, perhaps because it's cautious, because perhaps survival relies on us being more careful, they get trusted more, but then it totally ignores when things are positive. So I think like probably the greatest conversation or like talking point that you have right now in the US, a lot of people are saying like the American dream is dead. But when I hear you speak, it doesn't feel like that's your experience there. It feels like you still have kind of a, and this is something like I would like to hear more of your opinion before I comment on this, because it's linked actually to YouTube that I would talk about this. But like you still feel that that's alive, and then that's like a uniquely American experience.
I compare it with the rest of the world. Like obviously the US isn't perfect. There's so many things I could talk. I mean, man, our homeless issue is horrible. Like it's getting worse too. There's a lot of issues with the US. The US is not perfect, but I'm just simply comparing it with the rest of the world. Parts of the world that I know about that I've been to. Man, like it's like no other, I feel like. As far as just the obviously you talked about the wealth gap. For sure. I think every decent person would want there to be less poor people. I think of but I think I don't place as much emphasis on a wealth gap as where the bottom rung of society is, right? So if you look at your poorest poor people, what standard of living do they have? It doesn't really matter what the gap is between the richest rich people. This is kind of my opinion, right? I'm like, let them be rich, let them do what they do as long as they're staying within the law, staying moral. But it's less about the gap, but more of where is that bottom rung? Are they living in a slum, or are they relatively okay? I mean, look, I mean, I don't know why I'm Nigerian, so I'm very much up to date on like Nigerian everything, but we could use any other country, India, whatever. Man, look at like the poorest person in some of these countries compared to like a poor American, which is gonna have a TV, electricity 24/7. It is a discussion that needs to be opened up a little bit. Like, obviously, there are a lot of suffering people here that are poor, and I don't want to compare suffering because that's a dangerous slippery slope to do. But I'm just saying that we have a lot to do. But if I had to choose any country, I'm just again comparing the U.S. To other countries rather than saying we've got it, we've reached the pinnacle, which we haven't.
So now I could I definitely I can piggyback on this in terms of what people are doing a lot of the time is they're considering, well, you just said, so complicated issue. This is not like wholesale optimism I have for people here, but it is, at least I would say, one step removed objectivity, which is a lot of what we lose in our subjective experience, where if I stand next to somebody who's making $1 million, then I'm poor. If I have $1 million and I stand next to someone who has 50, then I'm poor. And so our relative scale can distort our experience of the sort of like progress that we have had as a civilization. And one of the best books I read, I think just last year, it's called Enlightenment Now. The guy who wrote it's called Steven Pinker, and he was doing this. He was saying how like there is this propensity now towards kind of like a naysayer, like a doom oracle kind of mentality. Whereas if you look at and this is like all scientifically backed, he said if you actually but if you look into the analytics of metrics which establish societal success, humans have over the last 100 years done insane progress by all of these metrics. So like just to rattle off a few, and these are non-debatable numbers. Literacy worldwide, never in human history has the world been so literate. Never in human history have women died so rarely in childbirth. Never in human history have so many people had access to next tier education. Never, and I mean, the list goes on without not laboring the point, but almost by every single metric, we would be able to say that as a society, we've improved and evolved. Like, you get into life expectancy, you get into health, whether you get into disasters, like everything we have improved at. But because our experience is lost in the moment of like our day-to-day, whatever it is that we're going through, you don't realize how far vaccinations and germ theory have carried us. Like, you know, you never know how good you have it until you have a toothache and you can actually go to a modern dentist to get your cavity fixed, as opposed to just having your teeth kill you. I mean, that's what used to kill people most of the time, was their teeth, right? So I wouldn't want to live
I wouldn't want to live at any other time or place than I am right now, is what I'll say. And you're Canadian, so you may disagree, which is totally fine.
No, I like it.
But me, but I think I'm trying to agree with you. Basically, I'm like, we man, like, yes, we are a society, specifically in specific parts of the world. But you're right. In general, the entire world, yeah, we're definitely on an upward.
And especially so in first world countries, and especially so in the wealthiest country in the world, like the US, much as it may be riddled with its problems. To acknowledge how we progressed does not disacknowledge the struggles that still need to be faced, but in terms of granting hope and a sense of actual realistic assessment of what we need to change, we could also appreciate how we've improved. Whereas it seems to be there is such an overemphasis only on how we're failing, which isn't useful.
What's interesting though is globalization, right? Let me make sure I'm using the right word, what globalization actually means. But the fact that we're better connected, we're all better educated. I think that no matter where you are in the world, whether you're I don't know, is it PC to use the word third world country? I'm not sure. You know, underdeveloped country, whatever you want to say, you're able to see how it's all about systems, right? Whether it be economic systems, political systems, because we're better connected as a world, we're able to see other working systems better, and then able to make the decision we're going to implement those same systems where we're at.
Yes.
And I think that's been, even though there are places in the world that are horrible places to live, the people there would agree. There is more education for the people on the ground to change from the grassroots level, the political and the economic systems, because there are some really good examples out there.
Yes.
That are worth copying.
Absolutely. There's I think like what I had a great description of this. It's like something I bring up frequently. It's this isn't mine, but it's like when somebody was asked what is social media, the person described it as a mirror. Whatever you hold up to social media will be reflected back at you. So it's this acknowledgement that a lot of what's happening right now, just like you described, it's like it's based on these systems, people will say social media is evil. Social media isn't evil. It's the way in which we consume or use these things that become evil, or, tear us down or prop us up. And it's how we interact with them that becomes really, really important, because I think you have this perfect crossroads here. Like, never has like great information been so available, but never has misinformation so easily been propagated at the same time. And there's the added hook in there that is negative, that negative misinformation spreads quicker because it appeals to, I think this is fairly accurate, a sort of like fight or flight response in us, where when you see kind of good news, you're like, that's all right. When we see bad news, we pay far more attention to the bad news, even if it's misinformation. So we have kind of like vestigial systems that kept us alive when there was a saber-toothed tiger outside of the, the cave that we lived in. But the way that social media can hijack that sort of survival instinct that we have is something that we're yet still figuring out. And to talk about negative capitalists, basically like things that go for infinite growth, you don't have to believe in infinite growth and you can still believe in capitalism. You can believe in social media and how incredibly useful it is, but question the sort of addictive constructs that are built into our use of it, like infinite scrolling, the sort of predatory algorithms that might exist there. But as a whole, I think it does speak to kind of an improvement of things. One thing I wanted to talk about, just in terms of what was it, like entrepreneurship. So like I'm curious to get your take on this. Like I think there was this like weird, basically there was a stagnation in terms of entrepreneurial possibility through the sort of like call it industrial revolution, because corporations and companies basically so established themselves that the person who wanted to be entrepreneurial saw themselves either being caught up or absorbed. So my example would be like, there was a point where if you wanted to make better shoes, you could just jump into that market. But as soon as the mega established powers got into there, it no longer became an option, because what are you going to compete with? Nike? You're going to compete with Adidas? But with the platform that you and I now have, the creative platform, which allows you to reach an audience, monetize, and in itself can't be controlled in the same way because it's digital, has meant this like explosion of entrepreneurial potential. Because you can monetize that you're the guy who loves magic cards. You can monetize that you're the guy who builds A-frames out in the woods. Like, it's really remarkable now how the average person, if you have an internet connection and a phone, can start a business. It's like on a growth scale that's different than it was before, but definitely I feel like there's an explosion of entrepreneurial potential, whereas we were kind of stagnating up into, say, like at the beginning of the internet, there was an incredible stagnation of what people could accomplish entrepreneurially. Like, what do you think about that?
You're right. You're totally right. Like corporations are very interesting, and that a lot of what you get is a lot of corporatism, I think is the right, or crony capitalism is another word, where it's actually corporations kind of, doing secret dealings with the government. Yeah. Not going through things the right way. And it's not really the free market that's like determining who's winning and losing. People are kind of cheating and going through government, which I think people should generally not be for. What's interesting though about corporations though is, yes, they have the ability of, spitting out a lot of products cheaply through volume. What corporations tend to really be bad at though is like being flexible and really kind of knowing a successful business at the end is solving a problem, right? Being connected with solving a problem that your audience wants to be solved or needs to be solved. And so the cool thing about, a slimmer type of company or an individual entrepreneur is they're able to, there's less bureaucracy as far as, if it's an artistic type of thing, like determining the type of content that a specific niche of audience actually would want, discovering new niches that are, coming up through popular trends that, if you're creating products, like literally being on the forefront of like what's being propagated in high school as far as what's the new cool thing of this year. It's like, there's a lot of downsides of being a big corporation, which is why you see a lot of big corporations that aren't really trying to hire the right people and organize themselves in a way where they're really on it, they can falter.
Oh, absolutely.
Me as a YouTube channel, I see that specifically as far as that. Like, I feel like I'm a lot more flexible. There are bigger YouTube channels out there doing kind of similar stuff that I'm doing, but I really have a honed in niche that I feel like I know more about than let's say Netflix or whatever,
Totally. You can, you make a fantastic point. Your ability as an individual to, like it makes you more agile. You can see what it is that your audience is interested in. And as opposed to going through a multi-level corporate structure that says, let's do this or let's fix this, you can react immediately to it. And what's amazing as your growth continues is that you're then seeing individuals with a connected audience with the same reach as something that was only possible through a corporation before. Like, the only people who used to be able to reach the rest of the world was McDonald's. But now Josh Olufemi can connect with every single person in the world, provided all they have is an internet connection. That sort of rebalancing of power is a profound change. Absolutely.
It's beautiful. I love it.
Yeah.
Internet was one of the best inventions that we've seen in the world as far as that goes. Yeah.
No, I'm kind of curious, like, do you,
and social media specifically, what you're saying? Yeah.
Yes. Do you do you ever look at the sort of people, like, where in around the world people are tuning in, and does that like kind of blow you away? You're like, oh, here's somebody so and so, or like, I'm curious with your audience demographics, like, probably first and foremost the US, that's kind of natural, but like what else have you seen in terms of that question? If you've looked at all, it's not necessarily something we're always checking in on 24/7. I
definitely look at that. That's very important as far as knowing the type of content you want to produce. Even honestly, monetarily, like CPM is a very big thing as far as YouTube goes, as far as who is viewing your videos. Depending on who's viewing your videos, YouTube will pay you different amounts. And you don't want to, I mean, if you just don't, if CPM was the only thing you looked at, then you just cater to Americans, which I don't specifically do. I cater to a ton of types of people, but like maybe this is another controversial like topic. Shout out to everyone around the world. Shout out to all you guys in Japan, Canadian friends, all my Nigerian brothers and sisters. I was just telling this to a really, really good bro. He's over in Nigeria, thinking about starting a YouTube channel. If you want to start a successful YouTube channel right now, that's actually not even quite true. If you were to ask me, I would start a YouTube channel that caters to Americans first. That sounds so bad. Depending on where you are in the world, and then cater to a secondary culture, whether it be the culture that you're in. I could think of so many people probably creating valid arguments against what I just said, but maybe I'm thinking in the world of,
well, test the theory. So why is it?
Let's test the theory.
Yeah.
So I think the reason I said that is I think I was talking in the realm of tutorials. Okay. No, I wasn't even talking tutorials. So specifically, this person wanted to. Oh, it was my bro from Rwanda. Okay. He wanted to do a channel that was just completely in what's the language there? It's not Bemba. That's Zambia. Rwanda is Kinyarwanda. Okay. And I was like, bro, I get it. You want it to be Rwandan centric, and honestly, if that's what you want to do, by all means do it. But a thing to think about is the majority of people on YouTube right now are from the US. The highest paying people on YouTube, as far as people that Google likes because they're going to pay the most for it. Google wants to put ads in front of people that are spending dollars. And companies like to connect with YouTube channels and sponsor YouTube channels, they're going to have a lot of Americans, probably Canadian as well, probably people spending the pound, you know. So it's just something to think about. Like I get how it, you know, it may sound a little off, maybe a little arrogant, but I'm trying not to sound like that. I'm trying to think as practical as possible and give people as much practical information, and then they can then make their own decision. Maybe they're like, don't care, want to
Right.
do a channel, you know. So I'm saying, I'm not telling people what to do. I'm just saying, if you're thinking about growth and monetization, it's something to consider. It's something that I even had to, I'll give you a good example. The majority of my watchers are from the US, but I made a decision where I didn't necessarily, I put growth aside, but it wasn't in the realm of Americans. It was a matter of, I want to do video content, video production content. Well, I know that there are only, I think it's 10 to 15 million Premiere accounts, people using Premiere Pro. There are 15 million people paying Premiere users. So from that, I know there's a lot of people using Final Cut these days, a lot of people using Avid, but I'm just going to say that I'm probably not going to ever have a YouTube channel that's over 10, 15 million subscribers, just because there aren't enough people using Premiere to support that. And that's just a decision that you have to make, and I'm okay with. So that's a way better, less dumb way of putting it as far as cater to Americans. But just know the limitations of the choices that you're making as far as when you're shooting, when you're on YouTube. If you're doing you know, you have a niche audience, and kind of know the size of that audience, where that audience lives, and how much that audience is maybe able to even, how ready that audience is maybe ready to give monetary compensation for the work that you're putting in. And at least kind of have that in the back of your mind before you start a YouTube channel and then make bad decisions. Like, I'm going to invest 2 years of my life, and, you know.
Well, I think especially, yeah, I agree with you. It's especially important if, one of the things that I hope people would understand this, listening to what you have to say,
yeah,
the monetization isn't the end. It's that the end is that you would be able to create the kind of things that you love creating. And so that's why you can't ignore whether or not your channel, if you want to do it full time, you can't ignore that fact, because certainly.
Thank you. That needs to be emphasized. It's not about the money. It's not about, I know we're talking about money, but in the end, it's the money is a means to an end, so that you can actually put out quality content, free quality content for your audience without having to have to worry about having a second job. So you can put all the time that you and your audience wants into making that content great on YouTube.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Josh. It's been awesome having you on. I've definitely kind of been dictatorial periods of time here taken away from you in the course of how busy you are in each day, but I really appreciate it.
This is fun. Dave, who's Charles?
Charles is that's my first name. It's Charles David Jameson, but then I go by my second. It's a family thing. Whatever our first name is, it's like a previous family member to like pass down their name, so they're not forgotten. And Dave just seems a little more casual. Charles seemed a little bit too monarchical. I didn't want to be associated with the royalty over there in the UK.
Okay. Dude, that's another controversial episode.
There you go. Yeah, totally. I would give you a shout out, but you a chance to speak. But I was like, I can probably just list it. You guys can find Josh on Instagram. Check out the cool stuff he's doing there. I'll put the links down on the YouTube channel if you want the links to this. It won't be on Spotify or whatever. But also, if you're an aspiring editor, or you just want to see some like cool behind the scenes industry talk with all these cool video creators, music video creators, check out his YouTube channel. Aside from the Insta and your channel, is there anywhere else? I don't know if you have a website or not, Josh, if I should list that or.
That's good for now.
Okay.
Add me on Clubhouse, guys. It's the new thing.
I'm so bitter with my Android that it's not opened up to yet. I really wish I could be on Clubhouse, but I'm denied access to it.
Yo, man, Clubhouse has been a trip.
That's
They're gonna open up to Android soon. Very,
great.
very soon. They better.
No, I'm stoked.
Yeah,
I want to be there. But yeah, thanks so much, Josh. I really appreciate you coming on, and I hope sometime I'll definitely be continually learning from your vids, and then perhaps further down the road I could have you on again before you reach that 2 million, and then you're unreachable at that point.
I know, right? Nah, I will never be unreachable to you, Dave.
Cheers.
Just to everyone else.
Oh, cool.
Nah, appreciate you, man. I'm down to come on anytime for sure.
Right on. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. That's all for now. Tune in to the next episode. Always having some great conversations here. Until next time, take care. Peace.
See you guys.